Acts chapter 24. And after 5 days, the high priest Ananias came down with some elders and a spokesman, one Tertullus. They laid before the governor their case against Paul, and when he had been summoned, Tertullus began to accuse him. So this is Paul in Caesarea, standing trial before Governor Felix. The Jews in Rome have brought accusations against Paul, and they're wanting to kill him. The commander of the armies in Rome, the tribune, he rescued Paul from the Jews. He heard about the Jews' plot to try to murder Paul, so he's taken Paul to Caesarea, away from the Jews and any plots against Paul. He's taken him to Caesarea to face trial before Felix, and they're trying to find out if there's any truth and accusation that Paul is a bad person and if he is a potential rebel and a threat to Rome. And so even though all of the accusations against Paul have got to do with the Jewish law, because he's a Roman citizen, Governor Felix will hear the trial instead of just sending it to the council and letting them deal with it. And so the Jews in Jerusalem, the high priests and the chief priests, they are coming together to bring accusations against Paul. It started off that the Asian Jews were opposing Paul, but now it's become part of the high priest and the chief priests and the council. They obviously realize who Paul is and that he is a threat to these religious people having control over Israel and over Jerusalem. And so they want to take Paul out. And so they've sent one of their brilliant legal minds, Tertullus, and he's going to be presenting the case against Paul before Governor Felix here in Caesarea. And so he begins to accuse Paul, saying, "Since through you we enjoy much peace, and since by your foresight, most excellent Felix," so he's sucking up to him a little bit, flattering him, "reforms are being made for this nation. In every way and everywhere we accept this with all gratitude," which is actually not true. They hate the fact that Rome is governing over them. They want to kick Rome out so that they can govern over themselves, because Jewish people didn't want Gentiles ruling over them. It made them unclean. And so basically he's just lying here. He's flattering him and he's telling him what he wants to hear. Verse 4, "But to detain you no further, I beg you in your kindness to hear us briefly. For we have found this man a plague, one who stirs up riots among all the Jews throughout the world and is a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes." So 2 more false claims against Paul. Paul never stirred up any riots. It was always the religious Jews that stirred up the riots. The very people who are accusing Paul of stirring up riots, they are the very ones who stirred up the riots. So that is a false accusation. Verse 6, "He even tried to profane the temple, but we seized him," which is another false claim. That is where they were trying to say that Paul brought Greeks into the temple. And we saw before that actually Paul never took any Greeks into the temple. The Jews had only seen some Greeks with Paul and then assumed that he had taken them into the temple and defiled the temple. And so this accusation again is false. And the way Luke is presenting all of this, it is actually showing that Paul is innocent and the accusations coming against him are very false. Verse 8, "By examining him yourself, you will be able to find out from him about everything of which we accuse him." The Jews also joined in the charge, affirming that all these things were so. And when the governor had nodded to him to speak, Paul replied, "Knowing that for many years you have been a judge over this nation, I cheerfully make my defense. You can verify that it is not more than 12 days since I went up to worship in Jerusalem, and they did not find me disputing with anyone or stirring up the crowd, either in the temple or in the synagogues or in the city. Neither can they prove to you what they now bring up against me. But this I confess to you, that according to the way, which they call a sect, I worship the God of our fathers, believing everything laid down by the law and written in the prophets, having a hope in God, which these men themselves accept, that there will be a resurrection of both the just and the unjust." Paul is saying that he's not violating any of the law and the prophets, but actually the law and the prophets point towards Christ. And this way that Paul speaks about and the resurrection unto life that comes through Christ that Paul speaks about, all of that has been prophesied in the scriptures. And all of the Jews should know this. And so Paul is not acting contrary to the scriptures. He's actually acting in line to the scriptures, that this Christ is the hope that the scriptures speak about. And yet these Jews are persecuting me for holding to this belief in the scriptures. It's actually very clever what Paul is doing. In verse 16, so I always take pains to have a clear conscience towards both God and man. Now after several years, I came to bring alms to my nation and to present offerings. While I was doing this, they found me purified in the temple without any crowd or tumult. But some Jews from Asia, they ought to be here before you and to make an accusation, should they have anything against me. Or else let these men themselves say what wrongdoing they found when I stood before the council, other than this one thing that I cried out while standing among them. It is with respect to the resurrection of the dead that I am on trial before you this day. So Paul here is making a great defense for himself and showing that there is no evidence to back up the false claims that are coming against him. He's also brilliantly showing that he has not broken any laws and that what he believes, the way Christianity, is not actually contrary to the law and the prophets, but actually the law and the prophets speak about this hope of this Messiah, this Christ who was to come. And so Paul has done the very thing that the scriptures have spoken about. He's received the hope, the Messiah that was to come, whereas these Jews have rejected him. So if anything, the religious Jews are acting out of line with the law and the prophets and the scriptures, whereas Paul is fulfilling them and is not guilty of anything. Verse 22, but Felix, having a rather accurate knowledge of the way, put them off, saying, when Lysias the tribune comes down, I will decide your case. Then he gave orders to the centurion that he should be kept in custody, but have some liberty, and that none of his friends should be prevented from attending to his needs. So here, Governor Felix decides not to rule, whereas he should have, and he most certainly could have, because it's very clear that Paul is innocent. There is no solid proof to back up any of the accusations that have come against Paul. But we'll see a little bit later, he has an ulterior motive for why he doesn't, because he's wanting bribes and money. And so that's why he's also allowing friends of Paul to come in to visit him. And most likely he's hoping that they bring him money in order to pay for his release. And so Paul here is in prison in Caesarea, but he has certain freedoms as well. Verse 24, after some days, Felix came with his wife Drusilla, who was Jewish, and he sent for Paul and heard him speak about faith in Jesus Christ. And as he reasoned about righteousness and self-control and the coming judgment, Felix was alarmed and said, go away for the present. When I get an opportunity, I will summon you. At the same time, he hoped that money would be given to him by Paul. So he sent for him often and conversed with him. When 2 years had elapsed, Felix was succeeded by Porcius Festus, and desiring to do the Jews a favor, Felix left Paul in prison. And so you can see that the reason Paul is left in prison is not because he's guilty, but it's because Governor Felix is wanting money. He's wanting some bribes. And Paul refuses to pay him any bribes, but it actually serves as opportunity to keep presenting the gospel before Felix. And so Felix keeps hearing Paul, but it's all under pretense because he's hoping to receive money. But every time he hears him, Paul's giving him the gospel. And a part of that gospel was he's talking about righteousness and self-control and coming judgments. And it scares Felix. He gets alarmed by all of it, but he still doesn't change. And so then he's succeeded by the next governor, Porcius Festus. And instead of releasing Paul when he could have, he decides to do the Jews a favor by leaving Paul in prison. So this is all just political maneuvering. As he is stepping out of office, he's wanting it to look good in the eyes of Rome that he's done a great job of appeasing the Jews and calming the Jews and causing the Jews to live in order and obedience to Rome. And so in order to gain favor with the Jews and have them become compliant, he grants them this favor of leaving Paul in prison instead of just releasing him. And so then later we see the new governor Festus continuing with Paul's trial. But in the meantime, Paul is left in jail in Caesarea for 2 years. And so it's taking him a long time to get to Rome, But in the meantime, he is appearing before governors and many dignitaries and people who would have heard this court case, and he's having incredible opportunity to present the gospel to them. So why didn't Paul just pay the bribe and secure his freedom? Well, he could have done that, but I believe he had integrity. But actually, there is a whole lot more strategy involved here. He could have secured his freedom and then gone off to Rome and just preached the gospel, and who knows how effective that would have been. But rather, his strategy now is a really good strategy, because now he's going to appeal to Rome and actually get an audience before Caesar. Paul is about to stand before the most influential man on the planet and have this most profound opportunity to present the gospel.